Yes.
So again, hello
Yes.
everyone and welcome to the Web3D webinar series. It's good to see you all here today. Our webinar series will be exploring the future of 3D technology and its applications. And today we are thrilled to share with you a reprise of the keynote speech that was given by Dr. Don Brutzman at the Web3D 2025 conference in Siena, Italy in September of this year. Most of you know who Don Brutzman is. Dr. Brutzman is a leading figure in the field of Web3D and has significantly contributed to the development of 3D graphics and standards related to graphics. He is a key contributor to the X3D graphics standard, which is developed by the Web3D Consortium. He is co-chair for that working group. He has authored numerous publications and also a book for Web3D authors. And he has been instrumental in advancing many 3D technologies. So Don recently retired as a professor from the Naval Postgraduate School, where he led groundbreaking research in virtual environments and simulation. With a career spanning over 3 decades, his enthusiasm for 3D graphics, as we all know, is truly infectious. He has been inspiring students and professionals for the last 3 decades. Today in his keynote speech, he will share with us his insights on the past, present, and the future landscape of immersive 3D technology. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Don Brutzman.
Anita, thank you for that very kind introduction. I have some slides here. Let's get them sharing. And it's a real pleasure to be here and to give the talk that I first had the opportunity to present back in September in Siena, and it was our 30th anniversary of the Web3D conference. And that is pretty amazing. Certainly not something we expected when we started many years ago. You could see from the logos that we have collected quite a few sponsors and supporters along the way. And so I offer it today in the hopes that it'll help others, because this conference has certainly helped me. I think it's helped all of us what we've achieved, and there's still plenty of work to go forward with. So let's look at that. I've organized these topics by 4 categories. First, people. People matter the most, and we really can change the world. Then technology and challenges, they go hand in hand. And interestingly, what you accomplish depends in large part upon what you decide to pursue. We'll take that apart and put it together again, see what that means. Surprising is that process matters. Most people, rules, get out of my way. I'm trying to get good stuff done here. But we found that having a process doesn't slow us down, but actually make sure we're hitting the right marks, getting things done. And finally, what does it mean to go after progress, and what can you do? And I think a first-person perspective helps. So there's my chop at, what did you guys do for the last 30 years? So let's take a look at this. And so when I say people, I mean everybody listening and everybody who might use our work someday. And since it's the web, that's everybody. Everybody's on the web. And let's reach back into some of the origin stories. We have first in 1997, I had the privilege, the great opportunity to be presenting in the Edge, which was the technology showcase at SIGGRAPH, Special Interest Group in Graphics annual conference, always a major event. They're still rocking and rolling. Mark Pesce, Tony Parisi built a model and it's a model of a banana. And we saved that model, and there it is. And it might not look too impressive by today's standards, but I'm going to say something a little radical here. I didn't want anybody to be shocked. It still works. And they were using pencil and graph paper to figure out all of these coordinates. We left the seams in just as it was. And wow, that's pretty cool. So that led to a bunch of people getting together and discussing, can we get going on really unlocking 3D for the whole World Wide Web? Because there weren't really any efforts along that way. Open Inventor turned out to be a very strong category by a competitor by Rick Carey, Paul Strauss, a few other great people at Silicon Graphics. And so we held a competition, and Vermal 1.0, that discussion, basically established a community and established the attitude of, well, let's look at things and talk about them and figure it out. Now, I've got a little vignette here from the first Web3D conference when we were at the Supercomputer Center in San Diego. We had a fabulous host, Mike Bailey, who had been given the tutorial on introductory 3D every year. And there's 40 of us sitting around the table in San Diego, and each person had brought a little white point paper, a page or two, and we were all ready to go. What does it mean to put 3D on the web? And after an hour, hour and a half, we're still scratching our heads wondering, when does this thing start? Mike Bailey comes in and says, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry, everyone. I've been called away. I have to leave today, but I hope you have a good day. He's gone, and now we really have 40 people staring across at each other on a big square table. So we just started talking. Everybody had shared their papers, and we said, what can we do? What can't we do? What do we need to do? And that really set the tone, that very first Web3D conference. Um, um, right from the beginning, everybody in that room, everybody engaging said, well, let's implement, let's evaluate. It has to work or it doesn't matter. And so virtual reality modeling language, you said, well, that was pretty good, 1.0, but we really need a 2.0. We got to that level of realization within a year. It was very fast. And we further realized that we wanted to stabilize it so it didn't get swept up by some other company or pushed out of the way, so that we could make sure that we defined it well. And that's why we reached out to International Standards Organization, ISO, the top banana of all the standards groups. So we then created a Web3D consortium to establish a business model, make sure everything was protected. And boy, that it's amazing how just that first year or two of activity has translated into 30 years of conference. And that last bullet I added for today's talk, that when we looked around the room in Siena, Italy, just a few weeks ago, I gotta say, it looked a lot like that room in 1995 in San Diego. And so it always is about the people who want to engage, who want to do stuff. So how much have we done? Oh my goodness. Anita, thank you for assembling this slide over the years. What a giant saga. What an amazing amount of capabilities. And it's capabilities that we keep aligning with and building upon and accumulating and integrating so that they interoperate. And that's pretty cool. And the saga continues. We're very careful about what we add so that we don't break anything that might come later. And that's why you see this steady set. Each yellow dot is an update to the ISO standard, each and every one of them a significant technical milestone. Across the bottom, you see all the domains that have grown over the years. And the more we do, the more we do. So the Web3D conference, I think, because it's an ACM SIGGRAPH conference, because it's peer reviewed, because it's an outstanding opportunity to talk and work together, I think that's been critical to this progress. Okay, here's a little more about that Web3D conference. You've got the blurb about describing it. It's a really wide envelope. It's not the Web3D Consortium conference, it's the Web3D conference for ACM SIGGRAPH. So it's broader than that. Happy to ac accept contributions from all over the place. And my goodness, look at some of those box scores down at the bottom. 30,000 downloads in the last year, 300,000 downloads cumulative. Typically each article, the average is 443. Wow, that's a real opportunity for anybody who wants to contribute, who wants to take the time to write down, well, here's my idea, and yes, we've implemented, and now we're evaluating, and here's what we learned, and here's what we might do next. That's huge influence and impact that's achievable. That's huge availability via the digital library at ACM, Association for Computer Machinery. I hope that indeed everybody's following that last, gee, what will I write for next year? Now's a good time to be thinking about that. Okay, so that's much of the backwards, but what about technology? This is a very technical topic. What are the challenges? Why can't we just declare that it's all done? I think the way to figure that out is always on a first person basis. You have to decide what is it you really want to accomplish, and then how are you getting there? So here's a little Hollywood joke. You can walk around the film set and ask anybody, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? And they might be a photographer, director of photography. They might be costumes. They might be script. There's some great shows about this. Right now, The Studio is a fun program if you haven't watched that yet with Seth Rogen. There's the people serving food. Uh, but then if you ask them not just what do they do and you learn about how it works, you ask them, what do you really want to do? The consistent answer is, well, I want to direct. I want to be in charge. And and that's pretty funny because wow, when we build 3D worlds, we are directors. We can build the things we want. We can connect to the other thing. We can tell a story. We can have a narrative arc. We can express ourselves in ways that are more powerful, perhaps, than many other things ever before. So, what do you want to direct? What do you want to do? That's important. And sharing those goals with each other gives you the reality check. It lets you take advantage of other solutions, sees how we could work together. It's really true. And this pattern has been repeating for 30 years. And if anybody happens to know a single individual or a single organization that can do it all, please let me know. I want to applaud and shake their hands before they burst into flames. You can't do all this yourself because there's too much that other people are doing, particularly for the web. We have to get along and work together. So try very hard regularly to say, what is it I am really trying to do there? And if you're not describing it well enough to your own satisfaction, that's okay. Keep working on it. It's an iterative process. You rinse, you lather, you repeat the process, and you keep working on what are your successes, the criteria, what's my path, what's my demo. Okay, so how do you figure that out? Let's tease that apart a little bit. And usually that's the demo. And there's a thing in science, the scientific method. It's called, well, theory and an experiment. You have an idea, theory, it qualifies it, describes it, represents, and then the experiment demonstrates it working. Well, our experiment in computer graphics is the demo, and I like to call it quantitatively cool. Because if you have a good demo and you show it to people, they say, "Oh, cool. That's measurable. That's measurable." So it's all about the data. If you're not paying attention to the feedback loop, you're not paying attention. And so all of these things are intertwined, and you want to be thinking about that. How does my demo take me farther? How can I measure it? Can I show what I want to show? Can I show something that didn't work? Can I figure out, oh, this didn't work, why? Maybe you're understanding the problem better. Okay, so more happy words that it's a design space and it's always evolving, looking at others and figuring it out. So here's the next level that most people get that far and to some degree, and maybe they meander, but as they get more serious, they do it. But here's a fabulous metric, a fabulous question. Assume success. Then what happens? What if all your goals are met? Well, what do you do? What does it matter to others? Have you created something? Is there a new design space? And I sometimes think the very last bullet here is maybe our superpower. It was frustrating and irritating maybe over the years where some people would, there's always somebody who has a complaint or something that didn't work or what. Oh, I like those because every time somebody shouts, "You're running straight into this giant hole in the middle of the street." Oh, good. Thank you. Let's stop. Let's look at that hole. Do we go around? Do we get past it? Are we going in the wrong direction? Noticing those errors is super powerful. Okay. Uh, I never quite thought I'd be giving a talk that espouses process, follow the rules, but it really has been a key part of our stable success. It allows people to engage, and it's surprisingly necessary if you want to innovate under the long terms. It's not a set of handcuffs, but it's a path forward. Um, it's curious to observe meetings of different groups. Some groups get stuck on who's in charge and what are we allowed to do, and it's hard to break out of that. But if you focus on what do we want to do, then who's in charge is starts translating into how do the people in charge help us do what we want to do, which is a better balance. Um, I was first became really aware of this when I had the opportunity early 2000s to go represent Web3D at the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, and some of SIGGRAPH pioneers and others maybe remember the browser wars when Netscape first came out and Microsoft and others, they were like, "Oh, we're going to own the future by owning the browser," and got very spirited for a couple of years how they fought. And so I thought, "Oh, this will be fun." It was up in Toronto. I got there and expecting a 3 day free for all of all these big companies slugging it out. Oh no, not at all. Every member of W3C gets to send one person. And so that's first pretty equalized. So you had all these really big companies and medium companies, and you even had Fred's Pizza Shop and website business sometimes in the room. And they all talked about, well, what are the rules? How do we get stuff done? What does success look like? It was really interesting. And what that really does is not determine who's the winner at a game, but rather it allows everybody to say, should I invest? Should I engage? How do I play? How do I get return on my investment of time? Interesting, counterintuitive, not immediately obvious. And for counterexamples, I'd offer, well, we thought about keeping a list of dead companies, but there were too many. There's a classic business model in Silicon Valley that success equals you get bought, and you cash in and walk away. Well, how boring. Why would you want to do that? Well, you know, obsolescence, run out of money, competition. It does not advance 3D graphics. More to the point, where does that leave you and your modeling work and your 3D career? How many, and I always flinch when I think about this, how many people finished at a 3D job, maybe as planned or maybe prematurely, and they had nothing to show for it. All of their work is owned by the company and the proprietary tools that they were using. Was it good work? Yes, it was great. Could they show their mom what they did? Well, yeah, I have this nice picture I can print out for you here. That's not 3D. If it ain't moving, it ain't 3D. So we think that publishing on the web helps not just everybody else, but helps the 3D community too. Standards can seem pretty slow. Yeah, until you start counting, well, what about those other fast movers who aren't around anymore? I really like many people like the question from Ernest Hemingway, his rich, very wealthy friend, and asked in disbelief, how on earth did you ever go bankrupt with so much money? And his friend said, well, two ways, very slowly and then very quickly. There's the actual quote there, gradually, then suddenly. Stuff happens if you're not paying attention. So we make sure that X3D, virtual reality modeling language, and X3D, when we add stuff, we are certain it's ready. And if it's not ready, oh, okay, that's good. It's better to make sure before we add it to the collection so that other things can build on top of that. And so slow is okay as long as you keep moving forward in the same direction. And then it doesn't seem so slow anymore. Okay, so here's some pass forward on progress. Wow, maybe this was our first 30 years. If that sounds outlandish, well, I can tell you we weren't thinking about 30 years over the past 30 years. We were just thinking about what are we doing now? And it was, I'm grateful to Web3D Conference for this opportunity to think about, well, what have you been doing for the last 30 years? Because we keep doing good things, and here are the patterns that I'm presenting to you. So how do you make that tangible? Well, write a paper, write a poster, talk about your business's work in one of the industrial use cases sessions. Or if you've really crafted a tool, crafted ways to do things, give a tutorial. I tell you, there's no better way to learn your subject than try to teach your subject to somebody else. And repeat that question. What about the people you work with, your students, your proteges, your staff, your bosses sometimes? And if you engage in the program committee, reviewing other papers, donating your professional time to the shared knowledge, shared capability, it's personally very valuable to you. People are always too busy, but they're getting value they can't get any other way. The face-to-face, well, that's obvious, I think, to most people, but maybe not as much as it used to be because we're a lot more virtual now after COVID, after good progress on, we're sharing video now, but until you meet face to face with people, maybe you're not understanding them. And it's so cool playing this long game when we come get back together at a conference, talk to each other and go, oh, we're really doing it. So to me, it's amusing that when we started, for at least the first 10 years, we were considered the rebels. Why can't they just do 3D by everybody, like everybody else? Why are they trying to use the web? Yeah, we have all these great game engines. We have these other tools. Well, we're still going. And who's in charge now? You can, if you're not sure what wahaha means, there it is. Okay, so what's next? Metaverse has been very interesting. I won't ask for a show of hands, but if you ask for a show of hands on what the metaverse means, you should not expect to get the same answer twice. And if you ask them, okay, I want to join the metaverse, well, it ain't there yet. But it is a really good organizing concept that connects a lot of things. And so Web3D Consortium joined the Metaverse Standards Forum. They quickly went over 2,000 members of companies, individuals, lots of. It's important. It's a dialogue. They're not building any standards per se, but it's a way to talk about what standards might we have, might we use, how do we hook them together. It's really had a wonderful, wonderful amount of progress and shared understanding emerging as everybody tries to describe this elephant that must be in the big stone block there somewhere. The things that really stand out for me that I think are most important are use cases. Well, gee, what's the use case for something that doesn't exist? Uh, good luck with that one. But when you try to define it, then everybody can say, yeah, we know about this metaverse. We might be looking all at different things with our goggles and trying to grab on, but here's what I want to do. I want to buy something. I want to go somewhere. I want to author an experience that others can use. I want it to work across different devices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are several dozen use cases now that are important and useful. The two groups that I think are extremely valuable to Web3D Conference, Web3D Consortium are, well, first, the 3D Web Interoperability Group. Can we build on all the progress with Web3D for 30 years to say, gee, shouldn't there be a metaverse there? And also the Standards Register Group, which does the librarian work of how do we get the right words? How do we get the right meanings to the words? How can we take metadata and turn it into ontologies so we can start doing some machine reasoning and learning that makes sense? So here's a second pass on metaverse. There's a little more about those groups and echoes of if a tree falls in the woods. If some major capability is not on the web, does it really exist? Well, we've had many, many giant, wonderful, dominant companies and capabilities in 3D graphics over the last 30 years that might not be around today. And if they're not on the web, do they really exist? Well, maybe, maybe not. Your mileage may vary. Okay, so pretty fun stuff. Also wanted to flag this current initiative. Atnasios Malmos and Effie Laka. She got her PhD working first from two papers that she did in the Web3D conference, and now we have added physically based audio to X3D4. We want to render the acoustics of real spaces using 3D virtual spaces with the acoustic properties attached. So it is a new horizon. This wasn't a random selection of cool goodness, but rather Thomas and I rode the train from Siena, Italy to Bologna that Thursday for the immersive 3D audio conference. It had a lot of similar themes to the Digital Heritage Congress where the 3D Web3D conference was. Okay, so gee, what happens when we add physically based audio too? Stay tuned. Here was an insight from during the conference. Give credit to Nicholas Paulus for this one. And he described this. Now, I guess this isn't much of a confession, but I'm a very old man. And I remember when this came out, John and Yoko did a song. They did a big billboard. They said, gee, war is over if you want. This was at the height of the Vietnam War. And it was amazing how much pushback and distress they encountered from this. What are you saying? This is unpatriotic. We've got to be in a war. You're, how could you just decide that we're not at war? Super stimulating, just totally brilliant. So the parallel, you can go look that up. There are links there, that context. A modest parallel to where we are now is, well, we've spent so many years worried about this format and that format and which one dominates and which one's wins. And maybe it wasn't browser wars, it was format wars. And well, if we can interoperate, if we can load, if we can convert, if we can change, if we can render, if we can interact and push it to the web and get from wherever people might have started out to that common ground, does it matter what format they're using? Does it matter what tool they're using if we can get to this common denominator? Pretty interesting challenge question. Okay, so what's your problem? I don't know. I don't have a problem. What's your problem? That's a fun exercise with a young person and meaningful. Maybe we don't have problems, we have solutions. Maybe we don't have a problem until we know what we're working on. So here's a five-step problem, a five-step checklist for you. What is the right problem? What matters? What do you really want to do? What does that success look like? How do you measure that? What would your goals achieved be like? And what's your key contribution that makes that next step of possible occur? And then if that happens, assume success, then what? What influence and impact? Is this helping your career? Is it helping your knowledge? Is it helping your personal, professional progress on the problem you're working on? And then this isn't abstract or arbitrary. We are changing the web, also known as the World Wide Web. No, really, no kidding. So how does the world change? It's an amazing progression of opportunities, really, that face us here. And I'm not sure you can think on this grandiose scale anywhere else in 3D land. It's fun. Okay, so we had a pretty famous mathematician, computer scientist at NPS for many years, Richard Hamming. He was the third winner of the Turing Award, sometimes called the Nobel Prize of Computer Science. He was the first president of the ACM, the parent organization of SIGGRAPH, was the sponsor of the Web3D Conference. So he has a very famous talk he gave many times through his career, You and Your Research. And he started this while he was at Bell Labs. He went around and it became so popular that people would, when he'd go visit places, he'd give the talk, sure, and people would want to see it. Now, I had the privilege of seeing Dr. Hamming do this a couple times, and I certainly commend it to you. But he ended each presentation walking through how do you work on your career. He asked this question: Who wants to do important work? Well, of course, all hands went up because they showed up to the talk. They're interested in you and your research. Now it gets interesting. He would then ask big assembled rooms of people, who's doing important work right now? You see a lot of hesitate. You see maybe half go down. You see some people ready to grumble, and then they thought he was done. But then he asked the third question, mic drop, why not? Why not? Why aren't you doing important work right now? That's what we're talking about here. Only you can answer that. If you're not doing important work, well, I guess you won't be publishing that in the Web3D conference, but you could. What makes it important, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so a few more happy words. Yes, we can do it. It starts with what do you really want to do? And how do you become those changes? And then finally, can we measure the success? That measurement, that repetition is what gets us there. I first learned the Browning quote when I was high school, and it took me years to have some appreciation, understanding for it. Should a person's reach, of course, but it must exceed his grasp, or else what's a heaven for? If there are things we can't do, that's totally important to us. All right, so there's my reprise. There's the talk. Temperature was a little cooler today than it was in Italy, but very happy to share this with you all. Very happy to get it recorded so that we might share it again in the future with others. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Don. Thank you. Thank you for reprising your keynote speech. And this was, it was good to hear about all the challenges that we have faced and what the future of 3D needs to be. And I guess one of the things is it needs to be a collective effort, as 3D technologies are not just reshaping the industry, but they are also redefining how we create, connect, collaborate. So I do have a question for you. You're an educator, and we have quite a few educators here on the call. How can educators best integrate 3D technology into their curriculum?
Great question. Thank you, Anita. And truth in advertising, I retired in June. And so before I retired as an educator, I've shared, published a bunch of stuff. The book you mentioned, X3D for Web Authors, I think the book is about the only thing that might cost you money because that's the way books work. And I don't know any authors actually making money. But together with that book, we have examples, hundreds of examples. We have an authoring tool. We have slide sets. We have videos. I'm happy to share. It's all free. It's all out there. So we keep chipping away at the barriers that might prevent somebody from publishing to the web, comma, forever if they want. And that process walked us through so many things. Can somebody teach better courses than me? My goodness, I hope so. But there's a baseline. And if somebody wants to do that, I'm happy to offer all of those curriculum materials. One extra point, I find exams totally boring. boring's one of the worst things you can say about anything.
Would you
So I
like to
never
put a
gave
link?
exams. We gave projects. We let students author, and X3D is very well suited for that, for them to pick what do they care about, build a model, say, how does this model interact with others? It's on a par with HTML for web pages, and how hard is it? And when they're done, they understand 3D and they're not locked into some software that may get relicensed a year from today. So
Would Would you like to
there's
put a
my
link to the
offering
book?
towards education.
Don, would you mind putting the link to the book in the chat?
Sure, x3dgraphics.com. And it's also on my homepage, but I'll be happy to do that. Aaron,
I have one other question before I open the floor, and the rest of you guys can ask questions. Are there any technologies or emerging trends that are underappreciated today?
in my opinion,
Yes.
yeah, there's a lot. And I think many people actually believe this AI might be telling them what's an important trend. I, you have my questions. They are not starting with which trend do you think will get you the most traction or fortune, but rather what problem do you want to fix and what capability do you want to add? They can be informed by trends. There might be some new things, new interests that I can use, but I think it always comes back to you individually, and not which trend did we pick a winner on. If we were picking winners for the last 30 years, we wouldn't be here today.
Any other questions?
Just for historical reasons, I was wondering, Don, what does the original Vermal have any part of Open Inventor in it, or is that a completely separate format?
The formats are different, but the functionality is extremely similar. And in fact, Vermal 1.0 was pretty close to a subset of Open Inventor. Open Inventor was unusual at the time in that it wasn't just an application programming interface, not just C++ library, but because they focused on let's have a file format that can be programming language neutral, programming language independent, that can be a static scene. So um, some of our capabilities were still catching up to Open Inventor way back in the day. But it was really interesting to see how that yin and yang of code and formats, we got a lot from Open Inventor, and we've kept going in that direction. Not independent direction, but primary file format and used over and over again by APIs. So we're walking both sides of the street.
Thanks.
It would be worth your while to fish a Open Inventor book out of the library or somebody's bookshelf and look it over and say, this is a dialect of what we're doing. Did we miss any vocabulary?
Yeah, well, over the years, I've noticed that the Maya scene structure, scene graph is very similar to the Vermal X3D scene graph. And, I don't know the full details of Maya. I can't remember what company first started it up. I think had something to do with SGI. And I was just wondering, does it seem to have the same type of scene graph because they both go back to Open Inventor. I don't know. I mean, I'm just guessing. I don't know.
I expect that's probably true in several ways. And if you say the phrase scene graphs in a crowd of different 3D people nowadays, most people go, oh yeah, scene graph approach. There are different types of scene graph, but the fundamental structure of What's the geometry? What's the appearance? How do we move stuff around? How do we independently animate those things? How do we get inputs and outputs for users? Scene graph is a declarative way of thinking about it that's can be as equally as powerful as any imperative programming language where you're marching through an API and doing what it says.
Any other questions?
I just want to go along with what Don was saying. There's power and the depth of this, both the format and a runtime. And that's just such an important combination, because interfaces, the power that I've seen is kind of walking into it and from is that been able to take a vocabulary and put that vocabulary together with some data structure that are common. I mean, that's why Open Inventor was picking out the things. Everybody under the covers, these are the numbers. And let's put them in a presentable format. And that's been the power of me learning about 3D.
I think you're right, Joe, and it's interesting. When I showed you guys a banana before that first emerged in the world in 1994 in the last century, okay, I clicked on it and pop up it is in whichever web browser I happened to find. I've lost count of how many generations of software occurred between then and now. 3D graphics, it keeps revising every year and a half or so. It's progressed about as fast as Moore's law in terms of performance and capability. Oh, but the banana was not a program per se. It was a set of data that said this is the mesh of a banana. This is what it looks like. All models are wrong, but some are useful. We like bananas. Here it is. And let me point out one more thing about how that data was able to travel over 30 years to us today. We don't accept anything in the Web3D consortium that isn't royalty free, that isn't reusable for any purpose, so that we sidestep all of the licensing or royalty bearing or patent restrictions that can afflict other things. Just say, well, bananas are banana. Last I checked, nobody made a penny per bite on eating a banana. Well, we have not, and we have made sure that nobody can put a penny per click on viewing a banana. So that royalty-free process we have, in combination with the data-centric focus, I think is what allowed that banana we just saw to travel over 3 decades and be right there in front of us and go, oh, that's what they had in 1994. I like bananas, but that's your personal choice, I guess. Anybody else today? Julian, you mentioned chess has a well-defined set of rules, but look how many possible games there are. Yeah, they still haven't figured out how many games there are.
I was also thinking of mentioning Lego because, in doing the detailed study of it from when I was working there, people think that there's a bunch of rules for connecting bricks together. And one thing I found out pretty quickly in working with the designers is that they had no compunction about breaking the rules. And another rule I noticed is, well, one concept I noticed, okay, whatever set you build with chess, whatever model you make with it, it's never done.
Cool.
It's
Cool. So our careful process is producing those bricks that can be put together in so many ways.
Well,
So,
yeah, I would say also that you may think that rules are too restrictive, but another thing I'd like to point out is that the Library of Congress, with millions of works in it, consists of only 40 characters.
cool. All right. Well, we're rapidly approaching time. Anita, do you have any send-off words? Thank you for the opportunity to lead off our latest webinar series. You have more planned for us?
Yes, Don, I just put it in the chat. We have some upcoming webinars.